Thank you for tuning in to Critical Action, Leaders Getting Down to Business. This North Carolina Chamber of Commerce podcast is bringing together the state's foremost business leaders to really have candid conversation about the racial injustice that is in our state and in our nation, and the ways that the business community can really drive meaningful change in our state and in our nation. My name is John Murphy, and I'm honoured to be the host for this series of podcasts. Today's guests on the Critical Action, Leaders Getting Down to Business, are Jim Sills, who's the President and CEO of M&F Bank, and Jim Hansen, who's the Regional President, Eastern Carolinas of PNC Bank. So maybe, gentlemen, if I could ask you maybe just to introduce yourselves and your business so that people have got context. Jim Sills, if I can go to you first, perhaps you can just give us a brief intro and description of M&F.
Thank you, John. I'm the president and CEO of M&F Bank. We are a community bank that's located in the 5 largest markets of North Carolina. We have about $270 million in total assets. I've been in banking over 30 years.
That gives you some stripes, Jim, anyway, in the banking world. So, Jim Hansen, can you maybe introduce yourself in PNC?
Perfect, no problem. Jim Hansen, and I'm based in Raleigh. PNC is about 52,000 employees, a top 10 U.S. bank, a little over $400 billion in assets. And I've been in banking a little over 20 years, so we're all chasing Jim Sills.
We all are. We spend our lives doing it.
That's
so
right.
Listen, firstly, I want to say thank you to the two of you for coming along, because this is not, let's be honest about it, it's not the most comfortable conversation, but it's a conversation that we need to have. And if I can kind of delve into some of the, the kind of more recent events and the recent deaths of Black men and women at the hands of law enforcement, and along with kind of other, racially charged events that we have witnessed. What are some of the conversations that you're having within your own organizations around these events? And Jim Hansen, if I maybe come to you first.
Yeah, so I would start with many conversations, and sorrow would be a feeling that kind of comes out of them. And so for us, with large workforce, that's very diverse workforce, and across urban and rural areas, and all different types of financial services being offered. This has been, these conversations have been a very kind of galvanizing, pulling our team together, and very opening up of our team members. And so we've had conversations that have hosted by our executive committee, conversations that are hosted by our regional presidents, and then we have D&I councils and our multicultural employee business resource groups that have really led conversations among peers. And each and every one of them is candid and difficult, but transparent. And if we can't be transparent with each other, then how do we serve our communities and our team members in what we're doing?
And what would you say the overriding mood would have been in those conversations with your staff?
So humanizing. It's one where our teammates we care about each and every day, and but these conversations are ones that as we'll probably talk about as we go along here, we don't have each and every day. We sit around the table. We are everyone's welcome around the table. We're diverse in our thoughts and our teams, and that's our strength for us. But these are very humanizing experiences that some of our teammates are experiencing and others are not, and it's a very real, tough, and experience and conversation with that I think folks really need to have and understand to better just almost in a virtual world want to go hug these teammates that we care so much about that are facing things that in reality I may not be facing for no reason other than my skin color. And I think that's the most difficult part for our teammates is to realize how real that is to people that they care about each and every day.
Yeah. And Jim Sills, I mean, M&F Bank, because of its history and the background, is kind of very uniquely positioned. I mean, the same question to you, the conversation you're having, because I suppose you're kind of coming at it from a slightly different perspective in some ways, aren't you? But I mean, what are the conversations that you're having with your people?
Yeah, great comment. Our bank, we're a diverse organization. We have 70% of our employees are African American. We're the second oldest African American owned bank in the United States. As Jim just highlighted, they're very difficult conversations. Our employees were, reviewing the George Floyd videos over and over and over. And it was really creating a lot of mental stress on our employees and making it very difficult for them to work. And so we hold, because of the pandemic, we hold twice a week staff meetings with all of our employees, and I lead those calls. And we talk about these issues, and we were talking about events that were actually going on during that time period with the protests and the videos and all of that. And some of the commentary that we received from the employees was really gut-wrenching, and that they were having to have difficult conversations with their kids if in the event they're stopped by the police. But really difficult conversations. But I will say they appreciated us bringing this to them and giving them a platform to talk about it with all the employees at our bank.
Mm-hmm. I mean, when you look at the two of you representing banks, and you're looking at the banking institutions, they do form such they're such a major pillar in the communities, at all times, and particularly now. But I mean, how do you see kind of financial institutions? I mean, how uniquely positioned are financial institutions to address the systemic racism?
I can start, Jim. It's so one. It's to your point. In some ways, given that we help move capital and obviously wealth, provides opportunity and to folks. And then second, we're regulated a number of ways, and the CRA laws have been in place for 40 years to help support different parts of the community. And but I think even for us, we've had an outstanding rating for all 40 years, yet there are more deliberate things we can do. And I think it's that realization is no matter how hard you are working and to do the right things, there's always more. And it's kind of the stubborn journey of continuing to look both internally at structure and externally to keep getting better. But I think, John, you hit on a point for us in financial institutions is one that, we are the center. We represent our community, our clients, and the success of our community as a whole helps with the success of our industry.
Yeah. And Jim Sills, just the same question to you. I mean, where do you see that the role that financial institutions can play at this moment in time?
Our bank was founded to really address systemic racism. Back in 1907, African Americans could not deposit their funds into a bank or even apply for or obtain a loan. And so I think, as Jim just pointed out, banks can help reduce the wealth gap. I mean, the statistics that they've been touting recently that whites have net worths of $160,000 and African Americans have net worths of about $16,000, which is a ratio of 10 to 1. Banks like ours, including PNC, we can do more in terms of helping people to buy a home, get more financial literacy, improve their credit, and give them the building blocks that they need to be successful in this economy.
And if we broaden it out from the banks, I mean, the two of you are, okay, you're representing your banks and the community in the state, and both organizations have a major role to play. But if you broaden it out from banking, what do you see that businesses need to start doing? I mean, not just banking, but what do businesses need to start doing to kind of serve as bridge builders? Because certainly from everything that we're seeing is that, if we're waiting for, and this is not just a US issue, if we're waiting for governments to actually drive the change, I mean, I think this is true globally, then we will be waiting. But businesses have a real role to play. So how do you see the businesses driving the change in your community? Jim Sills, maybe I come to you first on that one.
Sure. I'm really encouraged by some of the recent announcements by various businesses and corporations and also banks that are providing pledges to their communities, but also to their employees to support communities of color, but also Black communities. And we're seeing that all across the United States. And I think that is a positive first step. I think business leaders have a role to make sure that their teams are diverse, that they have the right retention strategies, the right supplier diversity strategies, that they have the right composition at their board and management teams. And together over time, you'll see a greater impact in terms of people of color and diversity programs working and making businesses, better in terms of their support for their communities.
Yeah. And Jim Hansen, what would you like to see the business community do?
Yeah, I think, Jim, it's correct. And I think what we've come to realize in many ways is that, companies you could go back and look at annual reports for many companies, just talking even broadly, is that there are many steps towards diversity, but many of those steps were aimed inside the walls for the 8 to 9 hours. So maybe around work or vendor supplier. And I think one of the things that has come very much to light is the responsibility of companies to their community and the need of diversity beyond just the 8 or 9 hours or what the hiring piece is. And so how do we carry that out into our community, and what is the work around, to Jim's point on how we, like the company or financial institutions, help with home ownership and solving the wealth gap? How do we empower our employees? We've had a very big commitment to early childhood education, and our Grow Up Great volunteerism around early childhood is an area we've been able to really put resources behind to make a difference. Well, how do we take that and now move and shift or start another area where we support our employees in volunteering for social justice or economic well-being or volunteerism there that helps start to break down some of these walls, right? And I think that is for all of us. And then how do these companies work together to do this? And so in many ways, we've given money and we support organizations we have historically, but how do we all come together to say, hey, this is where we need to really move to make this bigger difference in our communities. And I think you're seeing a lot more conversation in that area, which is a very positive thing.
Yeah, and just staying with you there, Jim, I mean, PNC, what specifically is PNC doing to improve race relations?
Yeah, so we made a $1 billion commitment, which part of it was $50 million in grants. And again, as I said, grants can make some difference, but a lot more is around action within neighborhood revitalization and consumers and business and economic empowerment. We just named a chief corporate responsibility officer as a company. And so we looked at our organization and said, how do we take these areas that are already maybe doing pieces, but maximize, in a company our size, their ability to make a true difference and empower a leader at the executive committee level. And so one of my peers, who was our regional president in Washington, D.C., just stepped into that role for our company and, is pulling together our diversity inclusion efforts and our foundation and our community efforts and our community development efforts, because it is going to take, when you think about a large financial institution, there are a number of different areas, each doing the right thing, but how do we come together to really carry that forward in this journey and make sure that we are staying consistent in that voice and making a difference with our dollars and our time and our talents and our people for our communities.
Yeah. And Jim Sills, I mean, the same, for you as an MF Bank, what is it that you're doing? Because I'd imagine that also for you, is part of it is actually helping people understand, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of outreach. We're doing a lot of interviews like we're doing here today, and podcasts, and I've been interviewed by some national organizations, but that's not enough. One of the things that I think is kind of interesting is that a lot of major corporations and local corporations here in North Carolina have been reaching out to us to see how they can partner with us to kind of improve our position in the market, but also to improve race relations and to say they have a relationship with the second oldest African-American owned bank in the United States. So I'm encouraged by that. I think you all know that Netflix made an announcement a couple of weeks ago that they pledged to put about $100 million into African-American owned financial institutions. So I think just all working together, we can improve race relations and diversity in this country.
Yeah. I mean, Jim Sills, to ask you, I mean, it's kind of an obvious question, but I mean, have you actually personally experienced racism?
Yes, many times I thought about this question, and I've experienced it socially, from an education standpoint, professionally, and also geographically. But most of the situations where people were just ignorant, and I think with more education and exposure to diverse communities, they will eventually change their attitude and be more welcoming and more accommodating of people of different races.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, when I hear that, and I talk to you, and Jim, I know you, and for also, I'm sure then the same thing has happened in your family. And how do you get your children, how do you get young adults to process that without being bitter?
You have to tell them to stay positive, that they've, accomplished a lot in their lives in terms of their education, and they're all professional. I have 3 adult daughters, and that they're the new leaders that can actually enlighten people in the corporations that they work for, in the communities where they live, that, racism really should not be tolerated. And it's important that we recognize differences in this country.
I know, yeah.
Differences in people in this country.
Yeah. And I mean, Jim Hansen, have you seen that either in your organization or in your own kind of walk around life? You've seen that racism?
I think this is, you hit on a question. I'm just sitting here with, thinking about Jim Sills, who's a personal friend, but I've never asked him that question. And we go to lunch, and because you don't, for us, we don't think about it that way, but the reality is there's ignorant society that does. And one of the ones that hit home and kind of hard for me was in one of our conversations, we asked some of our employees, when did they first realize there was racism? And a young man who was in one of our branches said it was in 5th grade when my family's car broke down. I walked to school, and the resource officer thought I was skipping school and put me in the back of a car in handcuffs in 5th grade. And I have a son who's in 5th grade, and he walks to school. It doesn't cross my mind that is a risk of his. And yet there's this gentleman who's a coworker and friend that's his experience. And I think so these conversations, that's the reality that we have to understand, that our coworkers have experienced, and it's not right. And we have to commit to this journey to really change that.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me. It was one of the reasons that I was really, I really was keen to participate in these interviews, because, I mean, I can sit as a white European and say, well, isn't it awful? But it's got nothing to do with me. But I mean, you just can't say that. But also, one of the other things that I realized is that, my knowledge of the issue and the challenge was kind of barely surface deep. And one of the things that spurred me to do was to educate myself on the whole area of diversity and inclusivity, and to actually understand it fully, because I work with a lot of teams, and it's obviously it's a key element in working with teams. But I'm interested, Jim Hansen, that I mean, D&I, D&I has been, and diversity and inclusivity has been around for a period of time. And let's be honest about it. I mean, in many organizations, it was a bit of a box ticking exercise. You kind of said, okay, it's something that we must do, and somebody will do it. But recent events have brought it into a completely different level. So how will D&I be led through PNC?
So I touched a little on, we have Chief Diversity Officer, and really taking these steps in corporate responsibility to consolidate. we also, given a company our size, have a number of managers, and in many cases, right, your relationship with your manager and review and your future opportunity. And so, we've been measuring our managers on whether they include intentionally, and as a true measurement. So if I'm looking at my leaders, that is one of my measurements in their year end, and has been. And so, making sure that we're taking steps throughout our organization. There's no doubt we have a corporate commitment, but it takes everyone, making a difference and being engaged, and making sure that we're providing the education and resources, and continuing to get better as we go along. But it's as I said, it's one where, for all you can think you're doing some of the right things, there's always more you can do.
Yeah, that is true. And Jim Sills, for you with D&I through M&F Bank, how has that been driven?
We don't have the size of a PNC, so we don't have the sophistication and all the training and all the organizations, but we're a diverse organization. We need to talk about this topic more. We need to bring in some trainers from the outside to have these, to facilitate these types of discussions with our staff. We can always do more. And we plan to do that through my leadership team, myself, and also our HR director.
Yeah, and I think that the critical there is that it's got to be led by the guys like you, or the leaders of your organization. It's got to be driven from the top in your organization. I mean, one of the concerns that I'm probably have, and also I've heard being articulated, is that will this kind of drive for change and the momentum that we have, will this be sustained, or will something else come along in the world news and knock it off the agenda and it goes back? Do you think that we will allow things to remain the same, or do you think that the drive has sufficient momentum? Jim Hansen, maybe ask you.
I'm an optimist, and I don't believe that we step back. It would frustrate me immensely if we do. I mean, it's just there's too much pain, and some I've had some employees say, maybe this is a positive of this virtual, is that it's given everyone a moment at home with family to really reflect on how to make our society a better place, and really double down on that commitment. And so I think that we are trying to make sure that we think about our structure as a company, and the systems and blocks and other things that you may do and build over time. What are those, and how do we get them out of the way? Because we will not be the society or economy we want to be if we continue to function the way we are today. There's too much talent that is being held down for reasons that have nothing to do than their skin color, and that is unacceptable. And we can't let it stop us.
Okay, Jim Sills, maybe for you, do you see it getting knocked off the agenda?
Now, actually, I agree with Jim. I'm an optimist also, and I think that you're going to see these changes, and you're going to see more changes. It's amazing to me how much change has just occurred in the last 6 weeks. When you think about the statues that have been recently removed, the monuments and the flags that have been changed on, a particular state in the southern portion of the United States, and just all of the changes in corporate America, and then all of the social media and all the things that are just happening in this country at the same time, I actually think you're going to see even more change. So I think it's here to stay for quite a while.
I certainly would share that optimism, and I certainly hope that it happens. Before we wrap up, I mean, I appreciate that you're here and you're actually talking about and representing your organizations. But maybe just before we wrap up, just some personal sentiments that you want to share on this shift. Jim Sills, maybe I come to you first.
It's kind of like we're in some interesting times. You know, I feel like we've already gone through 12 months of this year, but we're only in July. In the last 90 to 120 days, it's just been a confluence of different events: the pandemic, the George Floyd incident, the protests, all the, you know, just all the social unrest that's happening in this country. And you know, I guess it's about time, and we need more change, and we need more leadership. And I'm glad my friend, you know, Jim is on this panel with me today, because we're dependent on leaders like Jim and myself to force change in our organizations, but also in the communities where we're located. So I'm happy to partner with Jim and some of the other members of our chamber, and but it's going to take a team effort.
Absolutely. And Jim Hansen, maybe ask you for your few thoughts.
I think that Jim's correct. I mean, it's been for the sorrow and humanizing side. It's also been really great to watch folks in our company step up and lead in this, and really have a platform and a place, and we have to make sure we continue to give them that that platform, and that we're all at the table together. And this, you know, it's going to be a stubborn journey that's not as easy as, you know, pulling one solution bar. This is one we have to commit to, and it's going to take corporate leadership across the board. And, you know, to Jim's point, it's spending time like this. It's times we send text to each other and call offline, or you know, he helps out, and really just that we're continuing to make sure that we're keeping lines open so that business can be a driver in making a difference here.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for being with me today, and certainly I appreciate and I respect the bravery that you have to come on and talk openly about this, because I know that it's not an easy subject. But I also think that, you know, the state and the nation needs more leaders like you to kind of stand up and be held accountable, and also to provide that leadership, which is so badly needed. So Jim Hansen, Jim Sills, thank you so much indeed for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye.